So today we are going to be factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. So when we have a leading coefficient other than 1. So the first method we're going to talk about is your favorite, guess and check. You see how he looks a little frightened? You should be frightened. It could take you a long time to do these problems using guess and check. Think about this. So now we have factors of 4. So before we just went ahead and threw in an x and an x, but now think of everything that could go here. We could have x times 4. We could have 2 times 2. We could have 4x times x. So we don't really know. X, 2x, 4x could go in this blank, and the same thing could go over there. Then over here we could have 1, 3, 5, or 15, because those are all the factors of 15. So this could really go on for a long time when we try to put the combination of all of these together to get an answer. So I would not suggest using guess and check. You're welcome to try doing this using guess and check, so if you want to pause it and try, go for it. But I will not be using that method because that could take us all day. So, welcome back. Here's how we're going to do this. We are going to use Peltier's pants, stolen by Mavis Pearsall. Okay, so can you see how this looks like a pair of pants here? Do you see it? Can you? Okay, if not, I'm sorry, but Miss Peltier calls it pants, so that's what we're going to call it. Okay, so here's what we're starting with. So write down on your paper 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. So instead of guess and check, we're going to use this method. And just kind of hang with us. It's going to sound kind of confusing at first, but it'll get easier. Okay, so what we're going to do first, bring down, bring down the 2x squared. Okay, so see on the outside of the pants is where you bring down the outside terms. You also bring down this 12. Okay, now the middle term is what we're going to change up here. So you see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the coefficient from this, so the 2, and the constant, 12, and I get 24. Okay, so off to the side, I'm going to use this little method. So I need something that's going to add to make 11, and I got the 11 from right here, and multiply to make 24. So pause for a second and think about two numbers that add to make 11 and multiply to make 24. Welcome back. I hope you thought of 8 and 3. Okay, so 8 and 3 add to make 11, and they multiply to make 24. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split up what was 11x. Now that I know that they need to multiply together to make 24, I'm going to split them up to 8 and 3. Okay, so the 8 and 3 came from over here. So now I have 2x squared plus 8x plus 3x plus 12. So notice that's the exact same as what I started with. I just changed the 11 into an 8 and 3. So this is going to help me to factor. Okay, so just stick with me. If you're confused, just write down the example and hopefully it'll make more sense. Okay, so here's what I left off with. I left off with 2x squared plus 8x and 3x plus 12. So that's what was on the last slide. First I'm going to split it into 2. So you see how I drew this line? I'm going to split it into 2 halves. Then I'm going to factor the GCF out of each side. So out of this side I took out a 2x and I got x plus 4. And out of this side I took out a 3 and I had x plus 4. OMG, they match. And guess what? That's what's supposed to happen. If you did it correctly, when you get to this point, you should have 2 things that match. Alright, so we did it right. Yay! Okay, now I'm going to take the x plus 4, and that's one of my factors. And then I'm going to take the other part, so I have 2x plus 3, and the other part goes here. And now I have officially factored without having to guess and check. So now I can go back and see if I did this correctly. Alright, now I look back and think about what my original problem was, and it was 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. So I did actually factor it correctly. Alright, so this might seem like a lot of steps to do one problem, and maybe you think guess and check is easier, so you're welcome to do guess and check. But to me, this makes more sense, but you're welcome to use that if you'd like. Alright, so let's try that again. I know you're excited because you really like this method. So pants. First thing I'm going to do, bring down the outside terms. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I take the 5 and I take the 8 and I multiply them to get 40. Alright, so now off to the side I'm going to make this little chart. So it needs to add to make negative 14 and multiply to make 40. Alright, so we're going to think for a second of two things that add together to make negative 14 to multiply to make 40. So hopefully you realize that's going to need to be two negative numbers if it's going to be a positive 40. Okay, so pause and think about that for a second. And then I will help you up here if you need some help. Okay, so multiply to make 20. I have 2 and 20. I could do 10 and 4. Ooh, 10 and 4. So negative 10 and negative 4. That's two things that add together to make negative 14, but multiply to make 40. Okay, so the next step, what we said, we're going to then put those in here. So I'm going to put minus 10x minus 4x. Okay, so once I have that, my next step is that I'm going to split it into 2. Alright, split it into 2, and now I factor out the GCF of each side. Alright, then on this side, I have a minus sign. So I'm going to factor out a minus 4, and that gives me. And what did I say? What needs to happen? OMG, they need to match. So they do. So then I can take these two, and I make a factor. And then the two that match make another factor. Okay, I can always double check my answer by multiplying it back together. And then go back up to the beginning and see if it matches, and it does, so this is my final answer. Okay, here we go. One more time. So if you think you got it from those two examples, feel free to pause here and try it yourself. If not, just watch me go through it and you can try in the next one. Alright, so first step, bring them down. That's the outside of your pants. Next step, the inside of your pants. Bring down the coefficient, bring down the constant, and you get this number 30 here. Okay, then off to the side. Two things that add to make 17 and multiply to make 30. Okay, so that will be 2 and 15. So once I figure out it's 2 and 15, then I can bring this down and say alright, so next step, split it in half, find the GCF. OMG. Alright, so now I write the factors. I have 2x plus 5 and x plus 1. Last step, multiply, check your work, make sure you got the right factors. Look back up here. Did I get the right answer? And I see that I have a 6x up here, but I have a 2x here. So somewhere along the line I made a mistake. And look what I did. I took out a 5 and that should have been a 3. And here I took out a 2 and that should have been a 3. Alright, so if I change this to a 3, I then have 6x squared, 2x, 15x, and 5. And does that work? And yes, it does. And if I was taking a test and I hadn't checked my work, I would have gotten that wrong. But since I checked, I realized then that I forgot to change that to a 3. Okay, so if you got it, feel free to stop the video here. I'm going to give one more example for those of you who asked me for some extra examples. So here we go. When I have this little pesky negative sign out here, I need to get rid of that first. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take out a negative 1. From that point, it shouldn't be too difficult. So I'm going to bring these down. Okay, and then remember the inside of the pants. Bring the coefficient and bring the constant. And that gives me 14. So that helps me. I know that it needs to add to make 15. And it needs to multiply to make 14. So I think of two factors that will multiply to make 14, but add to make 15, so 1 and 14. So then I can write them in the middle here. Okay, next step, remember I split it in two. Factor out the GCF. That should not have been an x. I should have factored out a 7. Alright, so x plus 7 and 2x plus 1. And I have this negative sign out here. So then I'm going to go back and double check. So I get this. If I combine like terms and then I added the negative sign on it, it would be correct. So that is my final answer. Again, so remember, it looks kind of confusing, but just remember, you bring down the outside terms, and then you take the coefficient and the constant, multiply those together. So that gives you the number they need to add, and this gives you the number they need to multiply to. Come up with those two factors, and once you have those two factors, you just replace this 15 as the two factors, 1 and 14. So replacing the two factors, what that does is then makes you be able to do this process and split it in half and take out a GCF. And once you take out the GCF, you should have the OMG when they match. So then you have the two factors, and then check your work.